It is the 4th of the 10th, 2024, and today on the F1 docket there are three topics that we need to cover. F1 threads at which we need to pull, being of course Fernando Alonso's comments, man from Oviedo, Asturias, about one Maximilian Verstappen's expletives most recently at a Cognizant press conference. So too we got to talk about Toto Wolff and his comments about no longer wanting to flirt with one Maximilian Verstappen. Oh, the humanity. And finally, we'll get into some Danny Rick talk, because people are saying of late that Danny Rick knew that he was about to be sacked as soon as the Singapore Grand Prix. Why is this relevant? Because as far as the F1 community are concerned, reporting on this incident, Danny Rick's final race, it has been divergence. One of these, many people saying that he was the victim, that Red Bull, a la Christian Horner, didn't notify him of his impending doom, that indeed this was a stay of execution. But somebody's chimed in. That David Coulthard indeed has chimed in, and this matters. Why? Because all F1 journalists are created equally, but some, they say, are created more equal than other. David Coulthard is connected, good friends with Christian Horner, the man who built the house that is the balls that are red. And he had this to say, that Danny Rick indeed knew. And again, he's around. Let me set the table here, because David Coulthard is around the context, isn't he? He's a Red Bull ambassador. He was once upon a time a Red Bull driver, and this matters. You always see him popping up. Turtle W, an absolute legend, by the way. You always see David Coulthard popping up in the Red Bull drag races that they seem to host, as near as makes no difference, every single weekend on Carwow. So this matters. That DC is the one that said Danny Rick had to know that going into the Singapore Grand Prix, it was disingenuous of him to behave as if he didn't understand the circumstances, that he indeed was playing for his life, his career as an F1 driver, and more pertinently as a Red Bull driver going forward. David Coulthard said that he was told 2 weeks ago, at the same time that Liam Lawson was told, that he was set to supersede Danny Rick in that RB Visa Cash App drive as soon as COTA. Oh, the humanity. What do we make of this? Because again, if you look at the race, they had something very different to say, that speculation was rife, but Danny Rick was taking his cues from this, that the race spoke to somebody very close to Danny Rick, and they said that they'd been notified that they'd been sacked as soon as April. And of course, that's referring to the Barcelona Grand Prix, at which one Dr. Helmut Marko, Red Bull GmbH consultant, insinuated that he wanted Danny Rick gone. That was the point at which he thought it was best to promote one Liam Lawson to the drive. Oh, the humanity, the chaos, divergent, contrasting reports, therefore. And the one they call Alex Jakes, legend again of F1 commentary. Some would say that he's due to replace one David Croft in the premier position at the Sky Sport F1, the internationally syndicated broadcast, anytime soon. He had this to say, that Danny Rick indeed had known about his impending doom, that Red Bull harboured aspirations to promote Liam Lawson to his seat as soon as recently even as Barcelona, but Danny Rick's mission, should he choose to accept it, was one that he could pull it out the fire. He was playing indeed for all the marbles, just as he had done so frequently, so recently as Silverstone testing. You'll remember that was one-shot qualifying. Indeed, he was playing for all the marbles then and pulled it out the fire, as Danny Rick the Honey Badger has done on so many occasions. 9 lives. Danny Rick, the dead shall never die. Danny Rick. And so why would Danny Rick think on this occasion that he no longer have the ability to pull this out the fire? Alex Jake says that because the car had been so good around Singapore previously, that Danny Rick didn't want to communicate to the world's press and media that this would be his final Grand Prix, knowing all the while that this was a high probability outcome. As soon as he'd flopped qualifying, dropped the ball, that hope was no longer a thing, that Danny Rick had to know that in all probability, this, ladies and gents, was going to be his last Grand Prix. Hence his demeanour did one of these massive changes. Prior to qualifying, Danny Rick struck an optimistic figure. Post qualifying, all hope was gonzo. done for. That's the story of Danny Rick, and hence why we've got divergence as far as whether he did or didn't know. Oh, and by the way, Toto Wolff has chimed in on his driver lineup, saying that the time for flirting with Maximilian Verstappen, as far as trying to get a whiff of his signature between now and 2025, is over. And Toto, the boy who cried wolf, cuts a very different figure. Why? Because over the past couple of months, every single time somebody's put a microphone in front of his face, all he's had to talk about was two words: Maximilian Verstappen. What are we talking about? So now this strike cuts a very different figure, right? U-turn settings 180 degrees, because he's spoken to motorsport.com and said that as far as their negotiations with the three soon-to-be four-time champion, that they're taking a step back. We're sitting back, handing over the reins as far as the driver lineup to one Kimi Antonelli and one George Russell. Oh, the humanity, Joanna and Daniel. This is techie. Here's what he had to say verbatim. I think I've expressed it before, and we have a similar view also from Max's side. You've got to put your faith in your drivers or in your team. You need to give it the maximum support you can to make it a success. And only if things go really wrong will you consider other opportunities. Who is this fella? That doesn't even sound like Toto Wolff at all. Each and every single time they've spoken to him over the past couple of months, it's been all about Max Verstappen. I've said it on a gazillion occasions, and I will reiterate for the avoidance of doubt, that Toto Wolff still, as at October 2024, will dropkick in the chest one George Russell first of his name or Kimi Antonelli, if indeed that means that he can get a whiff of the signature of Max Verstappen. I don't care what he says. I can't take this dude at face value. Ross Brawn has told us who Toto, the boy who cried wolf, is. And again, if it means getting a leg up as far as business or indeed lap time, he'll happily turn two-face. That's who this chap is. And some might argue that that's a requisite, even a mission critical characteristic if indeed you want to win races and championships. Therefore, Toto continues, for me it's like that flirting outside whilst you're making your relationship work. If it doesn't work, then only is when I'm flirting outside. Well, hang on, Toto. Am I the only one that's daft here? Because I think Toto's been doing this for a while. Surely Toto can't be saying this in good faith, having flirted with Max Verstappen over the summer break, having held extensive contract negotiations, and so too having had a conversation with Max Verstappen's team around the Miami Grand Prix weekend. Who are we talking about here, Toto, the boy who cried wolf? Unless he's been looking at George Russell and thinking already that his performance is not commensurate, not requisite of the team leader that he needs at the helm of that Mercedes team. There you go, it's techie. Every top driver, continues Toto, in F1 knows that they need to compete against their teammate, whether he's young or old. George's teammate has been Lewis Hamilton, the greatest driver of all time, for 3 years, so he will be fine competing against one of the youngest drivers next year in Kimi Antonelli, who comes in with great expectations. Oh, the humanity. I don't know what to make of that from Toto. I can't take it at face value, especially given his most recent comments on Maximilian Verstappen. We know that they've been having conversations, and only now is he due to take a step back from those negotiations, because ultimately he got turned down. Max wanted to see how it plays out, or potentially Max wants to explore pastures anew at the Martin, the Astons. Do you know what I mean? Adrian Newey over there, Honda over there, Dan Fallows over there too, Andy Cowell, building a super team, a Galacticus of a technical team. Some would argue, F1 aficionados, that Maximilian Verstappen would be better placed to join Aston Martin as soon as 2025, depending on whether Red Bull can give him a car, as versus the boys and girls over at Brackley and Brixworth. Oh, and by the way, Fernando Alonso has come out and he's had some things to say, commenting on expletive gate. Lest we forget, for table setting, Maximilian Verstappen has been going hard at the FIA. The FIA say that expletives aren't allowed in public forum. As per the official FIA drivers press conference, Max Verstappen absolutely went flagrant, scorched earth against those rules and was in direct contravention, saying the F-bomb when referring to the travails of the RB20 iteration of car. To which many of the F1 community said, let's go Max Verstappen. How very dare they issue this punishment, telling him that he needs to go and do community service. Why? Because he's nothing if not an F1 driver. A cheeky F-bomb inside or outside the cockpit. Should it be met with these punishments? Why is the FIA and Mohammed Ben Sulayem proselytizing the drivers and related parties, fans, as far as what language they should be using or being exposed to? And here's what Fernando Alonso has to say, and this gets techie, ladies and gents. Why? Because Fernando Alonso, man from Oviedo, Asturias, is good friends with Maximilian Verstappen, and he will always be aware of what's happened over the past couple of weeks. Why? Because he has a god tier 200 level IQ racing mind. That's who this chap is. And again, no quote is misplaced from him, unintended. Here's what he had to say around the responsibility that drivers have to fans and the broader F1 community. Here's what he had to say verbatim, and I need to read it out verbatim because it's bloody important. The fans give us a huge responsibility because we are role models for so many, so that we have, ergo, we have to behave well. He continues, you have to be prepared to be a role model when you want to be one and when you don't want to be one as well. When you want to say something that is not correct, you have to control yourself, put on the brakes and be politically correct. At this level, you realise, continues Alonso, that a lot of people are looking up to us. If you are a driver or someone else with a public function, you have to behave yourself. The fans, they believe in you. They tell you, you are my inspiration. You never give up. You are a fighter. This reminds us that there are so many fans in the world following Formula One, and we must always keep that in our mind, front and centre of. The fans give you so much love, motivation, but that comes with responsibility. Oh, the humanity. Way to take aim at one Maximilian Verstappen, Fernando Alonso. And again, this is in stark contrast. Fernando never ever normally speaks out against his mate, Mr. Verstappen. So what's changed now then, chat? I would put forth to you this. Fernando Alonso is critically aware of two things: his key stakeholders and the future, what's coming, what's looming on the horizon as far as his F1 career and its trajectory. In the first instance, as far as sponsors of Aston Martin, Aramco are key, and in that sense, if he's managing stakeholder expectations, he needs to align himself with them. Therefore, lest we forget that Mohammed Ben Sulayem at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix tried to do everything in his power to ensure that Fernando Alonso, to manufacture the circumstance, bend/break the rules to ensure that Fernando Alonso kept his third place. This is Mohammed Ben Sulayem acting as a function of Aramco, one of the title sponsors of Aston Martin, the team for whom Fernando Alonso drives. And in the second instance, Fernando Alonso is getting on in age, 42, 43 years old. Fabio Briatore, his manager, has said that Alonso probably won't be around much longer. 2026 maybe will be his final season. Adrian Newey, however, has just arrived. He said that he'll need lead time circa 24 months to build a car capable of winning races and championships. Do not think for a second that Fernando Alonso will want to leave that team 1 second or minute before that day arrives. Fernando Alonso understands that Maximilian Verstappen could be his replacement, therefore, in that car as soon as 2026. In these words, he's making a case for himself, over the three soon-to-be four-time champion in terms of an understanding and a responsibility as to how to manage stakeholders and sponsors' expectations. How do you like your F1, therefore? Oh, the humanity.